Hello everybody, Calamity here, or at least that's what I want you to think. Today's video is going to be all about our new favorite dad, Arlecchino. And unlike your dad that left you at a young age, this one is here to stay. And I'm going to show you how to build her, from her talents to her weapons, artifacts, what teams to put her on. I'll briefly talk about her constellations, and we'll showcase her in the Spiral Abyss. That is a lot to cover, so let's get started. Arlecchino is a main Pyro DPS and does a ton of damage. In fact, she can be a hyper carry all on her own, meaning she doesn't have to rely on support characters. She can use them, of course, and take advantage of them, just like other main DPS, but she doesn't need them. That's how strong she is. But let's go ahead and talk about her talents first and foremost, starting with the normal attack. Now this is where the majority of Arlecchino's damage is going to come from. But as you can see on paper, it kind of just sounds like a normal attack talent, right? And it is. In fact, it gets boosted by her elemental skill, which we'll talk about in just a second. However, there is one long portion of her normal attack talent that isn't normal, and it's called Mask of the Red Death. When Arlecchino has a bond of life that is equal to or greater than 30% of her max HP, that's when she will enter the Mask of the Red Death state. And all of her normal attacks will be converted into pyro damage. Also, her normal attacks will do additional damage that scales off her attack and is multiplied by the ratio of her current bond of life percentage. And as you're doing attacks, your bond of life will be consumed. Now, this can just be summarized as bond of life equals more damage. That's all you really need to understand here. If you look at these skill attributes, again, pretty normal stuff. Also worth noting that she does have a special, if you do like her charged attack, if you hold it, she does a like air dash for 5 seconds. This is used for crossing, like rivers or small gaps, without having to glide. She can just cross over them. She has a little flying dash, which is nice. But that's it for her normal attack talent. Let's move on to her skill, and we're going to show you how it amplifies her normal attacks. So next up is All is Ash, and she's going to just do a cleave attack that does AoE pyro damage. And this is where it's important. She's gonna apply what's called a blood debt directive on them. This basically is an X on your enemies. It looks like her eyes, right? Her eye pupils. It's a bunch of X's on your enemies, and this is a good thing. While the enemies have the X's on them, they will take damage periodically, but that's not important. The important thing is when you do a charge attack or her burst, she will activate the blood debt directives, and this will give her the bond of life. Now, if you don't know what a bond of life is, you might be familiar with it if you've been exploring Fontaine a bit. There are enemies called the Fatui operatives that apply this buff, or sorry, this debuff, I should say, on you. And remember, you had to heal it off. It basically locked off a portion of your HP bar, and it's like, oh no. Arlecchino actually takes that debuff and turns it into a major buff for her. So yes, applying Bond of Life was considered bad before, but for her case, it's a really good thing. And it gives her a lot of damage because of it. So when you absorb a directive, that's how you gain your Bond of Life, worth 65% of your max HP. Your Bond of Life cannot go past 145% of your max HP. That's basically the cap. And if you use the elemental skill again, it will restart the duration and the limit on the value of Bond of Life. So she gets basically stronger as you get more Bonds of Life throughout the battle. Assuming you're not eating your Bonds of Life through normal attacks faster than you're making them. But basically she just gets stronger. That's all you really need to understand here. And we can see like you're not really doing this skill for its damage alone. You're doing it to apply the blood debt directives, which gives you Bond of Life. So when it comes to leveling your talents, this has a lower priority because, again, it doesn't do anything for the Bond of Life value. It just increases the damage, which, again, not really that important. So let's move on to her ult. on top of having one of the most stylish burst animations in the game, it's also really easy to explain. She's just going to do some AoE damage, and she's going to activate or clear any blood debt directives around her, and she's going to heal herself. So she's very similar to Hu Tao. You know, like Hu Tao with her burst is not something you need to like spam all the time. It's something that heals her in an emergency when you feel like you're going to take a lot of damage. You'd rather be doing her normal attacks to do damage, not the burst. The burst is, again, just that emergency healing and maybe like a cool finisher. That's basically what her burst is. And if we take a look at the talent... Oh, you can't even look at the talent things yet. I guess it's too new. But basically your talent priority should be your normal attack, and then skill and burst later on. Just try to get them all to 8 though, because you know you want them to all do pretty good damage. Mine are only at 877 because you need to fight the new weekly boss, which is Arlecchino herself, to get these things, and I'm still in the process of farming those. So let's move on to her passive talents. First one is Agony Alone May Be Repaid. This upgrades your blood debt directives in a bunch of different ways. So the first one being, you will gain a bond of life worth 130% of her max HP when you defeat an opponent with a blood debt directive. So when you have that, it's a nice bond of life to keep. Basically, you can keep going in the fight as long as you're killing enemies. And then the other part of this talent is, after 5 seconds, a blood debt directive will be upgraded into what's called a blood debt due. You can notice this on your enemies because the X that I was mentioning about earlier will actually look more glowy. It'll look more vibrant than the directive X. And you'll want these blood debt dues when you're fighting bosses because they give you a bigger bond of life, where it's not, it's not easy to, when you're fighting bosses, they don't have ads, right? So you can't really take advantage of the first effect. So the second effect is to help you with bosses, but you need to make sure you wait a few seconds, 5, so that your blood debt directive upgrades to a blood debt due. I know that's a lot to this is a lot to take in, but bear with me. It's not that bad once you get a understanding of it. If you need to rewatch what I'm talking about, feel free to do so. Understand that you also cannot pass the limit of having 145% bond of life. So even though it gives you 130, you're pretty much close to cap at that point. The cool thing about this though is that when it comes to your rotations, it's okay to use her skill first to apply a blood debt directive. And let's say you're using a vaporized team, right? Then while you're waiting for the blood debt directive to upgrade to a blood debt due, that's when you can take out Jingcho, Yulan maybe, do their skills, activate their burst, maybe give her a shield from Zhongli, maybe apply some other buffs from Kazuha or Bennett or something like that, and then you're good to go. And then swap back to her, do the charge attack to activate Mask of the Red Death, and then, then she can be the insane DPS that she is. But let's move on to the next passive talent. Strength Alone Can Defend. This is going to be a nice defense boost to her because she is definitely going to be taking up a lot of your field time. She's going to convert her attack into elemental resistance as well as physical resistance. She can gain up to 20% for both in this manner. And she gains 1% for every 100 attack she has in excess of 1000. So this is something you'll just build naturally. And if you have attack buffs, let's say you have Bennett and he gives you like 1000 attack, then that's literally 10% elemental res and physical res for your Arlecchino. So it's really nice little defense boost she has for herself. And last but not least, she does not have any sort of crafting or traveling talent. She has just a straight up 40% pyro damage bonus at the cost of being able to be healed through her burst. And keep in mind, this only says while in combat. So if you're using her for overworld exploration purposes, she still can be healed by other characters, just not when enemies are nearby. Just keep that in mind when you're using her. If you're in Spiral Abyss, this doesn't really matter because you're always going to be in combat, so her only healing is just going to be from her burst, which is why I will recommend a shield later on in the team section. With that's it for her talents. Again, I know this was a lot, but the rotation, her rotation is to use her skill to apply a blood debt directive. Now, depending on what team she's on, let's say you're using her again in a vaporize team, you would apply your vaporize or your your Xingqiu's burst or your Lan's burst, and then your other buffs if needed, and then you swap back to her to do her charge attack, which will activate Mask of the Red Dead. If you have her burst, feel free to use it. It does reset the cooldown, by the way, of her skill. So if the full rotation, if burst is available, is skill, burst, then skill again, then swap to your other characters for buffs and off-field DPS stuff, then charge attack, and then once all of that is set up, then go ham with her normal attacks. But let's move on to her weapons. So yeah, I pulled for her signature weapon. I'm sorry, I got baited by how cool the drip looks on it, and it looks like a scythe and stuff when she's in her Mask of the Red Death form, and it's really cool. But, you know, I understand not everyone's gonna have the gems for this, or the luck. And if you don't have this weapon available, that's okay. Remember that there's a ton of other 5-star options you can use. Anyone's 5-star like DPS polearm is a viable option here. So you can use stuff like Staff of Homa, you can use Primordial Jade Spear, you can use, you know, like all of them, Staff of the Scarlet Sands, if you have them. Now you might be like, you know, like, hey, I'm new, I don't have any fancy 5-star polearms or anything. Is there anything else I can use? If you did buy the Battle Pass, the Deathmatch, or the Ballad of the Fjords, also viable options, but I understand that's also not really free to play. If you are looking for a free to play option, it's not in my inventory, but the White Tassel is going to be a really good free to play option until you either buy one off the Battle Pass if you want, or if you decide to pull for a 5-star in the future. Yeah, White Tassel, gonna be your best friend early game. All right, let's talk artifacts. So we have, oh, it doesn't recommend, there's no recommendations yet because the stats are still being calculated. That's a surprise. So I'm not actually using her best in slot set because I'm currently farming it. But I will mention it. It is called Fragment of Harmonic Whimsy. This is going to increase your damage when you have a Bond of Life that increases or decreases, which is exactly what she does all the time. And this gives her a ton of damage. However, it's not the end of the world if you can't get it yet. You know, this is a brand new domain and plenty of us are still farming for good pieces, right? In the meantime, you can do what I just did and just use a Gladiators. Gladiators Finale is a fantastic set just to use on her for now and while you're farming the other artifact set pieces. As for substats, for Arlecchino, since she is a DPS, it's pretty easy to know what you're going for. You are just going to go for the regular crit rate, crit damage, attack percentage, energy recharge. We want some energy recharge, but you don't need to go like, you know, crazy on it. Just try to get, I would say, maybe like 140% ish for a reliable burst uptime. Again, she's not a character that needs her burst every single rotation, but you just want to have it, you know, remember that's her only way of healing in combat, so you make sure you want to have it, you know, ready when needed and stuff like that. So yeah, crit rate, crit damage, attack percentage, energy recharge, and some elemental mastery if you are using her in a, well, if you're using her in like a vape team or an overcharge team with Chevreuse, for example, then yeah, you want to get some elemental mastery to help you out there. Now let's talk about the Sands, Goblet, and the Circlet. So for the Sands, pretty easy. You just want attack percentage. No other stat. Maybe elemental mastery could be okay. Again, it depends on the team, but attack percentage is going to be your safer bet no matter what. For the Goblet, of course, pyro damage bonus. You know, the best substats you can get early on. If you don't have a good pyro damage bonus, you can always go for attack percentage or elemental mastery again. And for the Circlet, pretty easy. Crit rate or crit damage, whichever one you feel like you're lacking. You know, it depends what weapon you gave her or your substats rolled. So Pretty easy there. Now, Constellations, I'm just going to briefly talk about this in the save you some time and effort. Arlecchino is an insane DPS. She rivals that of characters like Nouvelette when it comes to her damage potential. And I say all of this at C0. She just like a lot of the characters in this game, you do not need to get any constellations for her. All of them basically just give her additional damage, basically, and some quality of life stuff, but that's it. I already feel like she's a character that does already a ton of damage, and I'll showcase this in my Spiral Abyss part coming up at the end of the video. So if you want to see it in action, a C0, not optimally built Arlecchino taking on the Spiral Abyss, I do have timestamps, so you can just fast forward there if you want to see it. But yeah, Constellations, if you want to get them, again, it's your gems, it's your money. If you feel like you want them, and you're being financially responsible, of course, then feel free to do so. But you do not need them. She's perfectly fine at C0. Great. Let's talk about teams for Arlecchino, and she's honestly really easy to build for. So I've already mentioned them throughout the video, but let's go ahead and talk about each one. The first one you can do is a vaporized team. You can also, again, there's no such thing as just like, this is just the one vaporized team and that's it. You don't have to have the characters that I have before you. You might not have some of these or any of these 5-star characters. Who can you use? You can replace Yulan with Jingqiu. You can replace Zhongli with literally any shielder in the game. Be careful though if you do decide to give a teammate like Toma, simply because his pyro damage might steal like a vaporize, from his elemental burst and stuff like that. So it is something you need to be mindful of when using him. You can also use Layla, or I guess Kirara, but you will get a lot of burning, which can damage your character a lot, especially with Arlecchino not being able to be healed. So just keep that in mind when it comes to your shielder. And of course, Kaza can be replaced with Sucrose if you don't have him. And this would be a basic example of a vaporized team. Again, you don't have to have this exact setup. You can swap out some characters of your choice. So for example, you could also do like a double hydro setup, like with Yulan and Jingqiu. You could use Farina, I guess, if you really want to, but the thing is, I don't recommend it because Farina drains your HP a lot and you can't heal it back. So she's not going to get a lot of value from her burst, and Arlecchino's going to be in constant danger because of the HP drain. Again, you can mitigate this with a shield, but we want to heal. We want people's HPs to fluctuate, basically, with Farina to get the value of her burst. This would be an example of a hyper carry team. I mentioned this early in the video that Arlecchino is basically, she doesn't need any like off-field DPS to help her. She can do it all on her own. And these characters just basically help her do that more efficiently. Kaza will be here to help group up your enemies. Again, Zhongli is to make that low HP playstyle feel a lot safer. But any shielder will do. And then we bring Bennett here, not for the heals of course, but for the attack boost. As long as she's standing inside Bennett's ult, Arlecchino's damage will just skyrocket, and do basically just tons and tons of damage. I mentioned this before. I don't have Chevreuse, so the 4th slot would be where Chevreuse would be. But if you want to do an overcharge team with her, this is what your team would look like. Maybe you can replace Fischl with Beto if you're taking on more bigger groups of enemies. But either way, this is a setup for overcharge if you want to go that route. I mentioned this earlier as well, but if you wanted to go the burning route with Dendro and Pyro, well, it'd be something like this. Again, the biggest problem with burning is that you also damage yourself, just like when you do Burgeon. And stuff like that, you damage yourself, and that's probably the biggest danger when running a team like this. You're gonna need some constant healing from Arlecchino's ult, as well as, well, Bennett's not gonna heal her, but Bennett will heal your other teams in case they also get affected by the burning. Kirara to give you a shield, as well as more Dendro application and Dendro resonance if you want to roll that way. That's going to be it for my Arlecchino guide. Hopefully this is helpful to someone. I'm just going to do a little bit of a rant before I send you guys off to my Spiral Abyss attempt. And I just want to say that Arlecchino, just really strong Pyro DPS. She joins, you know, she's in the same league as, you know, Hu Tao, Diluc, Yan Fei, all those, Yoimiya, all those really strong Pyro DPS characters we've had for years. She's, you know, she's just as good, if not a lot better than some of them, depending on your preferred playstyle. I definitely recommend her to anyone that wants a big DPS upgrade. You know, if you feel like your account is lacking some DPS characters, well, definitely pull for Arlecchino. She's going to help elevate your DPS to the next level for sure. I also want to point out that, you know, if for those that are wondering, well, I already have Hu Tao, I have a Diluc, I have, you know, other signature weapons, I built them a lot, I'm happy with my Pyro DPS. Do I need to pull for Arlecchino? If you're happy with your Hu Tao and how your other Pyro DPS teams are performing, then I would say you could probably skip her, because she's just going to do more of the same. She does vape, you know, you can set her up in a Vaporize team, a Hyper Carry team, Overcharge team, Melt team even as well. I forgot to mention that earlier in the video, but all of those same teams with your current Pyro DPSs, except, you know, maybe Klee, because she's not really good with elemental reactions, are going to work just fine with Arlecchino as they, you know, as they work with the other DPS characters. So it's up to you if you really want, you know, another Pyro DPS to your repertoire. I don't know what your accounts are looking like, but all I can say is that she's really strong and really fun to play as. Again, she's like Nuvolet's damage levels of like just crazy high numbers all the time, and just really easy gameplay. It does have like quite a little bit of a setup. I'll admit that there's a little bit of a setup with her combo, but once her Mask of the Red Death is activated and you got the Blood Debt directives all on your enemies, and you just at that point you just mash and go to town, and it's really fun. My 2 cents is just, you know, pull for her if you really need some DPS characters. You'll see how good she is in the Spiral Abyss. I promise you, she's really insane. And again, keep this in mind when you see my Spiral Abyss footage. She is not optimally built. I can definitely get her talent levels much higher once I farm the weekly boss. Once I farm the weekly boss a couple more times. Her artifacts are also not optimized. She's not using her best set yet. That gives her a ton more damage, as well as the possibility of getting even better substats on each artifact piece. So there's always that chance there, even though it's going to be hard to beat some of the gladiator pieces I have already, but you know, we'll get there eventually. Easy character to play, easy character to build, not complicated at all, very fun, and I'm just repeating myself at this point, so don't forget to leave a like and or subscribe to the channel if you found this guide helpful for you. That helps me out a lot. And if you have any other additional questions about Arlecchino, maybe I forgot something to mention, or maybe you've been playing her yourself for a few weeks already and you have some other tips and advice that I forgot to mention, feel free to do so in the comments. I'll try to my best to help out those that are that have questions about her. And with that being said, thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next video, and feel free to stick around for the Spiral Abyss run.
みんなは俺が天道ここにある
終わりね
権限よっここより登るさっと全力攻撃だ剣女盤石
捕まえたかかれ
さっと月のように永遠なる却下する
糸よ工作せえ
さ
捕まえたかかれたふっや
みんなは俺が守れせえふっはっ権限
せいとどの目が出るか
岩山八九とここより登る貫こう全力攻撃はっやっとはっと
揺らぐことなし。燃えろ天理チョーク。
かかれ。
霹靂先陣。恐るるに足らず。
ふっせいと糸よ工作せよ。
難攻不落。
月のように永遠なる却下すやっやっちょっとはっさ
断罪発揮。
捕まえた。
権限はっやっやっと
かかれ。た痛がって
天道ここにあり。
みんながそばにいて
どの目が出るかしら。
却下すやっやっせいここより登る貫く
かかれ。痛がっちゃいない。
天道万象。
みんなは俺がはっやっやっと
糸よ工作せよ。
とせいせい月のように永遠な却下するはっはっ
捕まえた。かかれ。
みんながそばにいてくれ
天理チョーク。
やっはっ
どの目が出るかし
権限